Shut down your workstation and leave. Brandon Pierce stood at the edge of my desk, arms crossed, jaw tight. No good morning. No explanation. Just an order delivered like he was doing me a favor. It was 10:47 on a Tuesday morning. I'm Dennis Kowalski, 54 years old, and I've been working systems architecture for 28 years. Long enough to know when someone's about to make a mistake they can't take back. My terminal wasn't just any computer. It was the only system with direct access to our defense contractor's SCADA feed, a secure, air-gapped connection monitoring satellite ground station operations, $5.5 million in annual revenue, 450 jobs riding on the contract, a Department of Defense compliance audit starting in exactly 4 hours, and Brandon wanted me to turn it off. "You want me to log out of the monitoring software?" I said, keeping my voice level, "or power down the whole system?" He glanced at his Apple Watch, then back at me. "Don't overcomplicate this, Dennis. Full shutdown. Now." I could have reminded him about the audit. Could have mentioned that the client's security protocols required 72 hours to re-authenticate any terminal that disconnected improperly. Could have pointed out that I'd sent him the compliance memo 3 times in the past 6 months. But 18 months of working under Brandon had taught me something important. He didn't want to hear it. He'd been hired as VP of Digital Operations with a mandate to modernize and transform. In practice, that meant dismissing anything that couldn't fit on a slide deck. He'd told me once, during a budget meeting, that my focus on security protocols was legacy thinking, said we needed to stay agile instead of hiding behind bureaucracy. So I didn't argue. I turned to my screen and started the shutdown sequence. The console flickered through its warnings. Disconnecting live stream, terminating processes, severing data feed. Each confirmation prompt felt heavier than the last. 60 seconds to dismantle a system I'd built from scratch back in 2003, right after the post-9/11 security overhaul. The screen went black. The cooling fans wound down. I opened the system audit log and typed, "Client SCADA feed terminated per management instruction, 10:49 a.m., Tuesday, clean, factual, time-stamped, the kind of entry that stays in a database forever. Leave your badge on the desk," Brandon said. I unclipped it from my belt and set it down next to my coffee mug. "Am I coming back?" He gave me that smile he used when he thought he'd won something. "We'll see. Take the rest of the day. I've got this under control." He walked away before I could respond, phone already out, thumbs moving across the screen. I sat there for maybe 30 seconds. Around me, the office hummed along like nothing had happened. Someone laughed 2 cubicles over. A printer wheezed out a report. The HVAC system pushed recycled air through the vents. Brandon had been looking for a way to take control of that terminal for months. He didn't like that the client's security officer had insisted I maintain sole custody. Didn't like that I was the only one who understood the authentication protocols. He'd called it a single point of failure in 3 separate meetings, always with that edge in his voice that meant he thought I was being territorial. Maybe I was. Or maybe I just understood that some systems aren't designed to be democratized. When you're handling Department of Defense contracts, security isn't about being flexible, it's about being careful. I gathered my things slowly, laptop in the bag, coffee mug off the desk, phone buzzing with a Slack message about someone's vacation photos. Out of habit, I pulled up the feed status on my personal device. Offline, completely dark. Brandon wouldn't notice right away. He'd grab lunch, maybe check in with Kyle Pennington, the CFO who'd sponsored his hiring. Probably tell him he'd finally dealt with that old school guy who was slowing down the digital transformation. But I knew what was coming. The DoD audit window opened at 3 o'clock. The client's operations team would be standing by, expecting the green status indicators that only my terminal could provide. The compliance officer would run her checklist. And when she got to line item 7, real-time SCADA monitoring, she'd find nothing but dead air. $25,000 in penalties. Per day. Plus the very real possibility that the client would invoke the termination clause and walk away from the whole contract. I should have gone home. Should have let Brandon figure it out on his own. But here's the thing about working in this business for 3 decades. You develop a sense for how disasters unfold. And I wanted to see this one happen in real time. So instead of heading for the parking garage, I took the elevator down 1 floor to the small cafe that overlooked the main lobby, ordered a coffee, found a seat by the window with a clear view of our building entrance. 20 minutes later, Brandon came back from lunch, tie loose, phone in one hand, looking pleased with himself. the kind of relaxed you only get when you think you've made a smart move. He didn't see them at first. Patricia Moreno, our COO, stood near the reception desk in her gray suit. Next to her was Andrea Lawson, the client's senior procurement officer. Both of them had that particular tension in their shoulders that means someone's day is about to get significantly worse. I sipped my coffee and watched. Patricia said something. Brandon stopped walking. The coffee cup in his hand tilted slightly, and for a second I thought he might drop it. Andrea held up her phone, screen angled toward him. Even from a floor away I could see his face change. Confusion first, then the slow, creeping realization that something had gone very wrong. Patricia turned toward the elevators. Brandon followed, still trying to talk, still trying to explain. Andrea walked behind them, arms crossed, expression flat. They were heading for the server room. I knew because that's where anyone would go when they realized a critical DoD system had gone dark 4 hours before a compliance audit. I finished my coffee and stood up. Time to go back to work. When I stepped back onto our floor, the energy had changed. You know how an office feels when something's gone wrong? Conversations drop to murmurs, people glance toward closed doors, everyone suddenly has urgent work at their desk. 2 junior analysts were huddled by the printer. One of them spotted me and straightened up. "Dennis, hey, thought you left early?" "Grabbed coffee downstairs," I said. "What's going on?" They exchanged looks, the kind that says we're not supposed to talk about this, but everyone knows anyway. "The SCADA feed's down," the younger one said, voice low. "The client's here. Brandon's in the server room with Patricia, and from what I heard, it's not going well." I nodded like this was news to me. "Rough timing with the audit today." "Yeah." He glanced toward the conference room. Through the glass walls, I could see Brandon pacing, hands on his hips. Patricia sat at the table with her phone pressed to her ear. Andrea Lawson stood by the window, perfectly still, watching Brandon like she was cataloging every word for a report. I went back to my desk and opened my laptop. Around me, people were trying to look busy while clearly tracking the drama. Todd Brennan from IT Infrastructure walked past, tablet in hand, expression grim. He caught my eye and gave a small shake of his head. Nothing good. The thing about systems like ours is they're not designed to fail gracefully. That SCADA terminal had encrypted authentication tokens that refreshed every 72 hours through the client's security server. Disconnect improperly, and their system rejects any reconnection attempt until you complete a full compliance review. Paperwork, approvals, security officer sign-off, the works. Usually takes 3 to 5 days if everyone cooperates. I'd explained this to Brandon multiple times, sent him a 10-page memo last October, walked him through it in person during a quarterly review. His response? This is exactly the kind of complexity that slows us down. We need to simplify our architecture. You can't simplify federal security protocols. You can only follow them or break them. My phone buzzed. Slack message from Todd. They're asking if we can restore from backup. I told them no. "You around?" I typed back, "At my desk." 30 seconds later, my desk phone rang. Patricia's extension. "Dennis, can you come to Conference B? On my way." The conference room felt smaller with 5 people in it. Patricia sat at the head of the table reading something on her phone. Andrea had taken the chair opposite, legal pad in front of her, pen capped. Todd stood by the projector, arms crossed. Brandon leaned against the wall near the door, trying to look casual. His watch face glowed as he checked it again. "Dennis," Patricia said without looking up, "walk us through what happened this morning." I pulled out the chair and sat down. At 10:47, Brandon instructed me to shut down my workstation. I asked if he wanted a session logout or full system shutdown. He said full shutdown. I asked a second time to confirm termination of the live client connection. He confirmed. I executed the shutdown at 10:49 and logged it in the system audit. Andrea wrote something down. Brandon shifted his weight. "You knew this would sever the SCADA feed?" Patricia asked. "Yes. I also knew it couldn't be reconnected without going through the full NIST compliance cycle. Minimum 72 hours, assuming the client cooperates immediately." "And you didn't think to mention that?" Brandon said from the wall. His voice had that controlled edge he used when he was trying to sound reasonable. "You just did what I asked without any pushback?" I turned to look at him. I confirmed the order twice. "You've told me in 3 separate meetings not to overcomplicate things with technical details. You said last month, and I quote, 'I need doers, not debaters.'" His jaw tightened. "That's taking it out of context. The audit log has timestamps, I said. The conversation happened exactly as I described. Patricia set her phone down. What's the fastest path to restoration? If the client prioritizes it, we can start the authentication cycle today. Best case, we're back online Thursday morning. Worst case, Monday. That's assuming their security officer doesn't flag this as a compliance violation requiring additional review. Which she might, Andrea said quietly, given that the feed went dark during an audit window. Nobody said anything for a moment. The HVAC hummed. Someone's phone vibrated against the table. The audit's postponed, Andrea continued. Our compliance team is documenting the outage. I need a written explanation of what happened and who authorized it. She looked directly at Brandon. From you, by end of business today. Brandon nodded. I'll have it to you by 5. Make sure it's accurate, Patricia said. Her tone was flat, but the emphasis on accurate landed like a warning. She turned to me. Dennis, I need you to coordinate the restoration. Work directly with Andrea's security officer. Copy me on everything. Understood. That's all for now. Todd left first, then Andrea. Patricia gathered her things without looking at anyone. When she passed Brandon on her way out, she said quietly, my office. 10 minutes. Then it was just Brandon and me. He pushed off from the wall and walked over to where I was still sitting, stopped a few feet away, hands in his pockets. You could help me here, you know? Help you how? Tell Patricia this was a miscommunication, that you didn't make the risks clear, something that spreads the responsibility around. I leaned back in my chair. Brandon, I confirmed your order twice. That's in the log. I sent you the security protocols memo 6 months ago. That's in the email archive. I've raised concerns about single-point authentication in 3 meetings. Todd has the notes. So what, you're just going to throw me under the bus? I'm going to tell the truth. That's not throwing anyone anywhere. That's just stating what happened. His face flushed. You know what your problem is? You think being technically right makes you right. But leadership is about more than following procedures. It's about being flexible, adaptive. Is that what you're calling this? Adaptive leadership? Careful, Dennis. His voice dropped. You're 18 months from full retirement. You want to spend that time making enemies? I stood up slowly, looked at him straight on. I've been here 28 years, built half the systems we run on, trained most of the people in this department. My reputation isn't based on who likes me. It's based on whether things work when they're supposed to. I picked up my notebook and walked past him toward the door. Dennis. I stopped but didn't turn around. If this goes badly for me, he said, it's going to go badly for you too. I'll make sure of it. The audit log doesn't care who threatens who, I said. It just records what happened. I left him standing there and went back to my desk. My inbox was already filling up. Message from the client's security officer with a subject line. Authentication cycle requirements. Urgent. Another from Patricia. Status meeting 8 a.m. tomorrow. Prepare timeline. I opened a new folder on my desktop and labeled it SCADA Restoration. OCTD 2024. Started pulling files. The original security protocol memo I'd sent Brandon. Email exchanges about authentication procedures. Meeting notes where I'd flagged the risks. 3 years of documentation. All time-stamped, all filed properly. Not because I'd been planning for this, just because I'd been doing my job. Around 6 o'clock, Todd stopped by my desk. You doing okay? Fine. You? He glanced toward Brandon's office. The blinds were closed. Been a long day. For what it's worth, I saw this coming 6 months ago when he first started talking about consolidating access. Yeah. You need anything for the restoration? Not yet. Client security officer is sending over the requirements. I'll loop you in once I know what we're working with. He nodded and headed out. I stayed another hour, organizing files, drafting the timeline Patricia wanted. By the time I shut down my laptop, the office was mostly empty, just a few people scattered across the floor, headphones on, faces lit by screens. Brandon's office was dark when I walked past. Outside, the parking garage smelled like concrete and old rain. My car beeped twice as I unlocked it. I sat in the driver's seat for a minute, hands on the wheel, not starting the engine. 28 years, 3 corporate mergers, 2 recessions, dot-com bubble, Y2K, September 11th, and everything that came after. I'd seen a lot of managers come through, each one convinced they'd figured out something nobody else understood. Most of them were gone now. The systems were still here. I started the car and drove home. I didn't sleep well, kept running through scenarios, though I already knew how most of them would play out. By the time my alarm went off at 6, I'd been awake for an hour. The office felt different when I walked in at 7:30. Quieter. People were at their desks early, which never happened unless something big was coming. I grabbed coffee from the break room and settled in to review the timeline I'd drafted. At 7:52, an email landed from Patricia. Meeting moved to 9 o'clock. Larry will attend. Larry Hoffman was our CEO. He'd founded the company 32 years ago, back when defense contracting was still done on handshakes and three-ring binders. If Larry was coming to a status meeting, it meant this had escalated past operations into existential territory. At 8:15, another email. This one from Margaret Sullivan in HR. Please forward all documentation related to yesterday's events, everything you have, no later than 8:45. Maggie and I went back 20 years. She'd been the HR coordinator when I first made senior architect. We'd worked together through 2 merger integrations and the 2008 layoffs. She didn't ask for documentation unless she was building a file. I sent her the folder I'd compiled. Security protocol memos, email chains, meeting notes, the audit log entry with its timestamp, 6 years of conversations about authentication procedures, all organized chronologically. Her reply came back in 4 minutes. Received. Thank you. That was it. No questions, no commentary. Professional distance, the kind you maintain when something's about to go legal. At 8:58, I walked to the big conference room. Larry was already there, standing at the head of the table with a printed document in his hand. Patricia sat to his right. Maggie had set up at the far end with her laptop and 3 different colored pens. Todd was connecting his tablet to the projector. Andrea Lawson had dialed in remotely. Her face filled one of the screens on the wall. Brandon came in last, carrying a leather portfolio. He'd dressed up today. Full suit instead of his usual business casual. He took the seat farthest from Larry. Nobody made small talk. Larry set the document down. Andrea, thank you for joining. I want to start by acknowledging that we've put your team in a difficult position. Our focus this morning is understanding exactly what happened and determining next steps. Andrea's voice came through the speakers, clear and controlled. Appreciated, Larry. For the record, our compliance team has formally documented the outage. We're holding on the termination clause for now, but we need a complete explanation before we can move forward. Understood. Larry turned to Patricia. Walk us through it. Patricia opened her tablet. At 10:49 yesterday morning, our SCADA monitoring terminal went offline. This severed the live feed to your operations center 4 hours before a scheduled DoD compliance audit. The system cannot be reconnected without completing a full authentication cycle, which requires 72 to 96 hours minimum. Who authorized the shutdown? Larry asked. Patricia looked at Brandon. Brandon gave the instruction to Dennis Kowalski at 10:47. Dennis confirmed the order twice before executing it. Larry's eyes moved to Brandon. Is that accurate? Brandon opened his portfolio and pulled out a printed email. I gave an instruction to consolidate system access. What I didn't know, what I wasn't told, was that this particular terminal had unique authentication requirements that would trigger a multi-day lockout. Dennis, Larry said, not looking away from Brandon, did you know shutting down that terminal would sever the client feed? Yes, I said. Did you inform Brandon of the consequences? I asked him twice if he wanted to proceed, once when he gave the initial order and again specifically about terminating the live connection. He confirmed both times. Todd pulled up the audit log on the projector. There it was, blown up on the screen in 14-point font, 10:49:17. Client SCADA feed terminated per management instruction. Below it, Todd overlaid my terminal session log. 2 confirmation prompts, both acknowledged. Timestamps matching to the second. Brandon leaned forward. Those prompts don't explain the consequences. They're just yes or no questions. I needed context. You received context, I said. Last October, I sent you a 10-page memo on SCADA authentication protocols. In February, I walked you through it during our quarterly security review. In June, I flagged it again when you proposed consolidating terminal access. Maggie pulled up something on her laptop. I have all 3 instances documented. Emails are in the file Dennis sent this morning. The February meeting notes are in our shared drive with your signature on the attendance sheet. Brandon's face flushed. He looked at his portfolio like it might contain a better answer than the one he'd prepared. Larry was quiet for a moment. When he spoke, his voice was level but hard. Help me understand your thinking. You received multiple warnings about authentication protocols. You got 2 confirmation requests during the shutdown, and you still authorized it 4 hours before a federal compliance audit. Why? I was trying to address a structural vulnerability, Brandon said. We had single-point operator control on a critical system. That's not scalable. That's not modern architecture. It was compliant architecture, Patricia said. The client's security officer specifically required single custody access for NIST 800-171. That's not our policy. That's federal regulation. Andrea's voice came through the speakers. For clarification, we insisted on single custody because distributed access creates more vulnerability points, not fewer. The authentication lockout exists to prevent unauthorized reconnection attempts. This isn't bureaucracy. It's how we maintain security clearance on DoD contracts. Brandon opened his mouth, then closed it. Larry picked up the document he'd been holding. I received a call last night from Kyle Pennington. He suggested we frame this as a communication breakdown, spread the accountability around. He looked at Brandon. I'm not doing that. The room went very still. Based on the documentation, you received adequate warning. You ignored it. You authorized a shutdown during a critical window, and now we're facing penalties and possible contract termination. Larry set the paper down. Effective immediately, you're on paid administrative leave pending final review. Maggie will coordinate next steps. Brandon sat back like he'd been pushed. Larry, I've been working to modernize our operations. I've brought in new frameworks, new efficiency models. You shut down a $5 million contract, Larry said. That's not innovation. That's negligence. Maggie closed her laptop. Brandon, your network access will be suspended at noon. Security will meet you at your office to collect company property. You'll remain available for follow-up questions. Brandon looked around the table like someone might object. Nobody did. He gathered his portfolio and stood up. This is a mistake, he said. You're making me the scapegoat for a systemic problem. The system worked fine until yesterday, Patricia said quietly. The problem was overriding it. Brandon left without closing the door behind him. We all sat there for a moment, listening to his footsteps fade down the hall. Larry turned to me. What do you need to restore the feed? I pulled out my timeline. Client security officer starts the authentication cycle today. We run validation tests tomorrow morning. If everything clears, we reconnect Thursday at 6 a.m. Full monitoring capability by noon. Confidence level? High, assuming the client cooperates. Andrea? Her voice came back measured. We'll cooperate. But Larry, we need assurance this doesn't happen again. Our contract requires stable access to that feed. If we can't count on it, we'll need to reconsider the relationship. Understood, Larry said. He looked at Patricia, then at me. We're going to restructure how we handle critical client systems. Dennis, you'll lead that project. I'm also moving you to VP of Infrastructure Reliability, effective today. We need someone in that role who understands that security isn't optional. I didn't say anything for a second. 28 years, and I'd never been in the room when someone got promoted. It always happened behind closed doors, through HR channels, with formal offer letters. I'll do it, I said. Good. Larry stood up. Let's get the feed restored. Everything else can wait. The meeting broke up. Todd and I stayed behind to coordinate the technical sequence. Patricia left to call the client's COO. Maggie gathered her things without comment, which told me she had more work to do on Brandon's file. When the room finally cleared, I sat there for a minute looking at the audit log still displayed on the projector. One line of text, 53 characters, time-stamped and permanent. That's all it took to end one career and start another. Security came for Brandon at 11:47. 2 guys from the lobby desk, professional and quiet. They waited while he packed his personal items into a cardboard box. A few people watched from their cubicles, then looked away. Nobody wants to see that happen, even when they know it's coming. I didn't watch. I was on a call with the client's security officer, walking through authentication protocols. Her name was Helen Carter, and she'd been doing DoD compliance work for 15 years. She didn't waste time on blame. Your staging environment is solid, she said. I'm starting the token generation now. You'll have it by 2 p.m. Run your validation sequence and send me the hash results by end of day. Will do. Dennis? Her tone shifted slightly. For what it's worth, I reviewed the documentation your HR sent over. You followed procedure correctly. Not everyone does. Thanks, Helen. Let's get this feedback online. We ended the call. Across the office, Brandon's door stood open, lights off, desk cleared. The cardboard box sat on a chair in the hallway while he talked to someone from HR in the conference room. Then he was gone. No announcement, no goodbye email. Just an empty office and a calendar that still showed his meetings for the rest of the week. Todd came by around 1 o'clock. Tokens here. Want me to start the validation run? Let's do it together. I want eyes on every step. We spent the next 3 hours in the server room, running tests, checking logs, comparing hash values, the kind of meticulous work that prevents problems instead of creating them. By 4:30, we had clean results across the board. I sent the validation package to Helen. She confirmed receipt at 4:52. Looks good. Authentication approved. You're clear to reconnect at 6 a.m. tomorrow. Patricia stopped by my desk at 5:15. How are we looking? Reconnect scheduled for tomorrow morning. If it goes clean, we'll have full monitoring capability by noon. She nodded. Larry wants to meet with you Friday morning, 9 o'clock. He'll have details about your new role in the infrastructure project. Okay. She started to leave, then turned back. Dennis, I know the last 2 days have been difficult. What Brandon said yesterday about your retirement, that was out of line. For the record, this company values people who do things right over people who do things fast. I appreciate that. See you tomorrow. I stayed late, prepping the reconnection sequence. Wanted everything documented, every step clear, nothing left to chance. Around 7, I was the only one left on the floor. Just me and the HVAC hum and the blue glow of monitors. My phone buzzed. Text from my daughter. Mom said you had a crazy day at work. You okay? I typed back, I'm fine. Tell you about it this weekend. Proud of you, Dad. I looked at that message for a while before putting the phone down. The next morning, I got to the office at 5:30. Todd was already in the server room, coffee in hand, looking alert. Ready? Let's do it. We ran the reconnection sequence at exactly 6 a.m. The authentication handshake took 47 seconds. Then the first status indicators appeared, green across the board. By 6:15, we had stable data flow. By 7:30, full monitoring capability restored. Helen called at 8:02. We're seeing everything on our end. Flow looks solid. I'm marking this as resolved in our compliance log. Good to hear. Dennis, tell your CEO we're satisfied with how you handled the recovery. The outage was unfortunate, but your response was professional. Patricia sent an email to the whole operations team at 8:45. SCADA. Feed restored. Normal operations resumed. Thanks to everyone who worked on this. Short, professional, no drama, the way things should be. Friday morning, I met with Larry in his office. He had a formal offer letter ready, VP of Infrastructure Reliability, salary bump, stock options that vested immediately instead of over 3 years. Consider it recognition for 28 years of doing things right, he said. We talked about the infrastructure project. He wanted a full review of critical systems, redundancy planning, documentation standards. I want procedures that survive management changes, he said. So when the next ambitious VP shows up with ideas about modernization, we have guardrails. I can do that. I know you can. That's why you're doing it. I signed the offer letter. That afternoon, I got an email from Kyle Pennington, the CFO who'd sponsored Brandon's hiring. Subject line, quick conversation. We met in his office. He got straight to it. I want to apologize. I pushed hard for Brandon because I thought we needed fresh energy. Turns out experience matters more than I gave it credit for. Appreciate you saying that. For what it's worth, the board is very pleased with how you handled this situation. You're exactly the kind of leadership we need. When I left his office, I thought about what had actually happened over the past 3 days. Brandon had made a decision based on what sounded good. Consolidation, modernization, agility, all the buzzwords that look great in presentations. But systems don't run on buzzwords. They run on procedures, documentation, and people who understand that security isn't negotiable. The following week, I started the infrastructure review, interviewed every senior engineer, documented every critical system, identified every single point of failure. Not because I was afraid of another Brandon, because this was how the work should have been done all along. 2 months later, I heard through the company grapevine that Brandon had landed at a startup, some kind of fintech thing. They'd announced him as VP of Digital Innovation on LinkedIn. Good for him. Startups move fast and break things. Sometimes that's what they need. But in defense contracting, you don't get to break things. 450 people depend on that contract staying active. They have mortgages, car payments, kids in college. When I reconnected that SCADA feed at 6 a.m., I wasn't just restoring a data stream. I was protecting those 450 families. That's the thing about this work. It's not about being right or being liked. It's about being careful. It's about understanding that shortcuts have costs, and usually someone else pays them. Brandon learned that the expensive way. I learned it over 28 years of watching what happens when people decide the rules don't apply to them. 3 weeks after I took the VP role, I got an email from a systems engineer at another defense contractor. Subject line, heard what happened. Respect. The email was short. Word gets around in this industry. People know you stood your ground and kept the contract alive. That's what professionals do. If you ever need anything, reach out. I didn't know him personally, but he was right. Word does get around. Defense contracting is a small world. Reputations matter. Not the kind you build by being impressive in meetings. The kind you build by making sure things work when they're supposed to. I've got 18 months until full retirement. Maybe I'll take it. Maybe I'll stay on as a consultant. Either way, I'll leave behind systems that work, documentation that's clear, and procedures that protect people. That's the legacy. Not titles or promotions or winning some office political battle. Just systems that keep running, and people who know how to keep them that way. In the end, that's all that really matters.